Hello and welcome to The Birth of a New Dimension. My name is Aurora. I am a galactic visitor is the best way to put it. I'm a star person who has come into this body through a portal that I invented. That's a genetic portal called the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. And on this week's recording, what I'm going to focus on is, someone emailed me asking some really wonderful questions about what I speak about. It's not the best way of saying it. The topic of the digestive system and being a light eater and the way we are currently structured as opposed to the way we were intended to be structured. Okay, so the question was a wonderful question. It went somewhere along the lines of, well, Aurora, if we were intended to be light eaters, why do we have this digestive tract? Why do we have teeth? And I think that these are wonderful questions. And so today, while I was doing my sun gazing, I was organizing my thoughts as to how I'm going to describe all of this, because this has everything to do with the time before death. The time before death was invented. I'll speak about this on this show almost every week. The sophisticated worldwide antediluvian or pre-flood culture that was, on this planet, across the whole planet, not just on one continent, because it's often known mythologically as Atlantis, and there are these myths about the continent of Atlantis sinking beneath the waves, like this Donovan song. And I'm trying to get across the idea that it wasn't just a civilization on one continent, like, the European civilization that is on the European continent. It was worldwide. It was across the entire planet. And it wasn't just on this planet. It was a sophisticated, connected galactic culture. That means that it connected to places that were far distant, both in location, in space, and also in time. And that's necessary because, in order to be able to have conversations with some civilizations that are far away, you have to be able to bend time. So, okay, because otherwise, if you were just doing it through direct line of sight, linear communication, by the time you sent out a query and they received it and sent something back to you, it could be millions or billions of years. It would be long past relevant. So the whole idea is that it's necessary to be able to fold the fabric or bend the fabric of time, space, and consciousness in order to be even having a conversation in relevant time. So the original design of our bodies was very different than the design that we are presently experiencing. And so you guys talk every week here about what our life was like before we had to experience death. All of this happened as the end result of the genetic degradation. Invaders came to this planet. These are not necessarily invaders in a clank metal spaceship. These are invaders of consciousness. And they came into the genetic code through genetic portals. Now, I must make a distinction because I introduced myself here. I said, hi, I'm Aurora, and I'm a galactic visitor, and I came in through a portal. That's this sculptural shape that I make that's called the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. That does not mean that I'm in any way associated with these malevolent invaders that came here 10 or 20,000 years ago or went to previous planets and have been raping or invading planets willy-nilly all across many galaxies and all across the cosmos. No. I'm very, very different than that. And that's the whole point of the Flying Rainbow Lasagna, that, I'm not breaking any cosmic rules. I'm not doing anything that's unethical. I'm only doing things that are consensual and literally based in love, the tone of unconditional love, because it's the strongest system that there is. When I make these decisions and choices, they're like aesthetic choices when I build a painting. And, I make these structural choices, and the reason why I do it is because it works. It's because it sticks together, it hangs together, everything fits properly. So it's the same thing behaviorally with my motivations, my value system, and the way that I act. I do things this way out of a very practical concern. It's because it works. Like when you look at the world of energy, if you send out a lot of crappy energy, the truth is you will receive a lot of crappy energy. And people can say, wait, though, Aurora, I can look around here and I can see all these billionaires that are sending out crappy energy. Why are they receiving billions of dollars in exchange for their crappy energy that they're sending out? Like they should get, like a punch in the face instead of billions of dollars. And I agree because we're in a system that at the moment needs debugging. It's a flawed system. Not that I'm a transhumanist, not that we are mere, computer simulations or anything like that, but I liken this world to a virtual reality that has a program or like a software program, and that I'm here like a debugger. that I'm experiencing what are the flaws in this system in order to, from a firsthand perspective, say, oh, we got a problem over here, we got to fix this. And a lot of the problems are problems in structure, like the basic foundation thought structure of the way that, the cosmology of like the story, the origin story. Why is the world here? How did it get to be here? How did objects get to be here? Why are things the way they are? There's a lot of foundation flaws just on that level. And in order to fix and heal and improve things, what I call rectifying the time field, it's necessary to analyze, pinpoint, analyze those basic flaws, figure out where they come from or what needs to be healed. And then we could call it patch code or rectification or the healing ideas, like the missing puzzle pieces or reshape. Imagine if you had like a oddly shaped piece that did not actually fit in the puzzle and you could actually take it out and sand off the parts that didn't fit, that didn't work, or, extrude parts that needed to be there. That's kind of what we're doing with these thought structures. And I say we, I'm doing this. I know I'm not the only person that's here doing this. It's changing the thought structure of society. And that's what I am doing personally with visionary artwork and music and broadcasts like this and videos and even a genetic dance that I do that speaks beyond, technology. This is, right now I'm using technology to talk to everyone. That's great. And it can speak to our daily waking rational mind. I also send out broadcasts and information that are beyond mere technology. We could consider them telepathic broadcasts that are also, along the same levels. And it's all intended to be unconditionally loving and towards freedom and, encouraging each person to be able to, determine their own trajectory or their own flight through time or their own life and to improve their experience. Okay, brief pause. Blah, blah, blah. Why do we have to rectify the time field? Because of these genetic invaders, because the distortion of our DNA is the distortion of time. So a big takeaway from all of this, and I talk about this in my class, P.S. Free plug for me. My class is called Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans. So you can find it on my website, which is flyingrainbowlasagne.com, or you can go to teachable.com and check out Flying Rainbow Lasagna University, or just do a keyword search for those terms and you'll find it. The time field is a living metabolism, like a living entity that has consciousness, thought, its own structure, its own identity, its own agenda, and it's been subverted or diverted or distorted in its true expression. In much the same way that each one of us as individuals, like we have a genetic code and we have a life plan and the person that we would like to be. And then there's the distortions, the limitations that might be social or biological or, financial, limited resources, all the things that have limited each one of us in our development. So that can be, either mommy and daddy didn't teach you this, mommy and daddy didn't allow you to do this, society didn't allow you to do this, religion didn't allow you to do this, you didn't have the resources to do this. Like, there are many, many limitations. And I won't explain in excruciating detail all of these limitations without also mentioning the solution, which is Flying Rainbow Lasagna. So we have these, intentionally programmed, really, social, economic, biological, religious limitations that each one of us is dealing with. And then it's each one of our duties or jobs or missions here to supersede those limitations, to transcend them, to jump up and over them, to not just be like, oh, well, I'm going to make a bunch of excuses. Like, I couldn't do, in my life on earth, I couldn't do blah, blah, blah because blah, blah, blah held me back. Like, none of that cuts it, because we're all supposed to be here in order to transcend these limitations. So if blah, blah, blah is holding you back, what each one of us has to do is innovate. Find a new thing, create a new pathway, make a way to make it happen. But it's not acceptable to say at the end, at the summation of your existence, if you have to like retrospect and answer to the things that you've done and you haven't done. It's not acceptable to say, oh, I couldn't do blah, blah, blah. It just wasn't possible, but you have to find a way to do what you need to do. So that's also part of the idea and the approach of the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. In my own personal experience, I faced a impossible challenge, a seemingly unsolvable problem, and instead of throwing my hands up in the air and saying, oh, well, like I'll just die or I'll just turn evil or something like that, I'm like, there's got to be a different option. So there I invented a new option. And that is my journey here as Aurora. And my whole intention is to share not only that option, Flying Rainbow Lasagna, with other people so that other people can apply that tool to their own existence, and to encourage everyone to innovate. Like if you're faced with an impossible choice or two bad choices, you don't have to be like, okay, like I'll just choose death or non-existence. Like that, none of that is good. Innovate. We all have this amazing creative capacity that allows us to think new thoughts, write new songs, paint new paintings, even make new people, make new skin cells. We have the capacity to innovate. And so that's what a lot of this is about. So back to this original concept of what our lives were like before death was invented. Because, okay, like even like something simple. Today I washed out my sweater because everybody's got to do laundry. Like, you know something? We're shedding skin cells all the time. Not only do we have sebaceous, skin oils and things like that come off of our body, but we're constantly having cells that die and then cells that replace the cells that die. And that's part of our homeostasis, or being able to maintain our capacity to be alive. And so, yeah, your used up skin oils and your dead skin cells accumulate on your clothes and then make them stinky. And this is why we must do laundry. Now, I'm explaining this to everyone. It probably seems painfully obvious. You know exactly why we have to do laundry. But the point is, in the time before death, we didn't have to do laundry. And this is because none of our skin cells died. None of our cells died. It was a time before death. This is like, how can you even imagine how different life was or existence was in that realm? So this goes back to the question of eating and food and digestion and our genetically altered bodies that we're currently using. So when I first came here as Aurora, in like this galactic being into this human body, I thought I could just eat pure light. What a rude awakening. I had to learn by trial and error, like, no, actually around here, you can't just eat pure light. You got to eat physical food too. And then I had to learn about what physical food and how to do it. It was like a whole long learning process, analogous to what, little children or infants go through, but I did mine in adulthood. And we are in a transitionary phase, or a hybrid phase, where we're moving from the human body being like a steam engine, old-fashioned steam engine, where you shovel in coal and the coal combusts and then out belches steam and also a bunch of energy for kinetic movement that makes the train go down the tracks. That's what our bodies up until this point have been acting like, but it's not their original purpose. They've been repurposed or hacked. Originally, we were designed to be solar powered. And that means that right now we use intermediaries that take energy from the sun or the stellar network and transform it into a physical molecule like a sugar or a starch that we can eat if it's directly or indirectly by eating an animal. Like plants and chloroplasts are these amazing, miraculous mechanisms, but not just like they're living mechanisms. They're a form of artifice. And this goes down to this idea of not everything that is artificial is evil or bad. Plants and chloroplasts had to be invented as this necessary intermediary when humanity lost the capacity to eat light directly. And light is energy and information and an organizational principle. And if you can't tap directly into that for all of your vitality needs, then what happens is a little miracle apparatus has to be created that catches the light for you and turns it into something solid. It's like a translation device. It goes from the potential of a photon and like the semi matter. It's light. It's not really matter. And slows it down and condenses it and coalesces it until it is matter. That is something that you can actually put into your material body. So that's the miracle of what plants do. They take sunlight and then they turn it into a sugar or a starch that they actually want to use for their own being. But then other animals can come along and eat it. Like humans can eat a plant, or animals can eat a plant, and then we can eat the animal. So we're eating light. And this is the whole point, that we were designed to eat light directly. So before death was invented, Nothing else had to die in order for us to stay alive. And this cuts to the very real dilemma that many people are feeling on Earth right now about ethical eating. Is it right to eat animals? Is it right to eat plants? What is it right to eat? And the basics of this are that as long as we are in this genetically modified and diminished format, it's necessary for us to maintain our lives by killing other beings. And then we achieve homeostasis by making more live cells than the cells that die off in our body. And even the microorganisms that help us to digest our food, they're in our intestines and they're dying all the time and we're eating them. That is part of our digestive process. And so, okay, wait, brief pause while I save my work. Okay, so in terms of transitioning out of our present state into a more exalted state where we can eat pure light, what needs to happen? So part of what needs to happen is a genetic rearrangement because we already got arranged or squashed into this position. So genes have to change, and that means our thought structure has to change, and also our trajectory and flight through time has to change. And also, biological structure has to change because that changed in response to the restructuring of genes. So the bodies that we're using, they're not only repurposed, but a lot of the structures that are here would not otherwise be here, or they would be used very differently. And also environment has to change because we've changed a lot of our environment in terms of domesticating plants and animals in order to fulfill our food and nutrition needs. Okay, I'm just going to try to start from the top. Our teeth were never meant to be used to grind up and mash food into a digestible paste. That's craziness. That's total craziness. So your teeth, all of our teeth were actually, and what they were intended to do and what they actually are, they're like the tuners on the antenna of your mind. And so first of all, they're crystals, they're crystalline structures, and they are connected to nerves that connect directly to the neurology of your brain and system of perception, like your brain and your eyes and your ears and your nose and your senses. Your teeth are absolutely a part of your sensory apparatus, and not just your 5 physical senses, but also your higher dimensional senses. So this also, we can understand that in this present level of society and humanity, anything that alters or adulterates, that's the word I'm looking for, the natural tooth structure, takes the thought structure, it inhibits your natural thought structure. So we're talking about orthodonture and dentistry. Dentistry, clearly this is necessary because look, I'm telling you guys, this is okay, an old-fashioned radio is made out of crystals. It has crystals inside of it that are actually perceivers that pick up delicate vibrations. And so your teeth are supposed to be like these crystals inside of your body that pick up delicate vibrations. And the idea of taking those crystals and using them as mashing of, food, for mashing together food parts, that's not the correct usage of them. It's like taking, whatever, finely tuned instruments and then using it for the most, mundane, gross task. And also, it fills the mouth with bacteria. So, because if you don't have to eat physical food, you don't have to mash things up with your teeth, and you don't have to have all of that dental bacteria in your mouth. And so, in Atlantis, nobody had bad breath. Nobody had to brush their teeth. There was no need to brush your teeth because you didn't have to eat physical food. And so the teeth and the crystalline structure of the teeth did not degrade. So, of course, it was not necessary to treat cavities. Or, oh my God, it's totally barbaric to drill holes in the teeth in response to cavities and then fill them with metal. And that's the first thing, these metal amalgam fillings. That's like changing the tuning of the teeth antennae that are in your head. So that's quite barbaric. And then also, although we understand it's necessary, but now humanity is recognizing, well, what if you could heal teeth if they have a cavity in them? What if they could be healed with either stem cells or some kind of regenerative enamel procedure? The idea of making a small hole a bigger hole and then putting metal in it is not a good way of dealing with a tooth problem. And then the other thing is orthodonture, which I have to tell everyone is equally barbaric. It's being done in a totally unconscious way that is merely cosmetic, like saying we want to, at a young age, reshape the structure of young people's teeth and mouths so that maybe their jawline looks nicer, or their nose looks nicer, or their teeth look more cosmetically, pleasant or straight, without recognizing that that is scrambling their circuits. It's like taking the perfectly tuned guitar strings of your body and twisting the knobs that they're not perfectly tuned anymore. So my problems with orthodontia is that it's done unconsciously. It's also done at usually a very young age. And often it is unnecessary because as young people's jaws grow bigger, their crowded teeth often rearrange themselves like the way that they're supposed to be. So a lot of the time, the intervention of orthodonture is not even necessary, but it's become a rite of passage, something that is normal in this time and place. Just like circumcision is barbaric, but it's a normal thing in this time and place. So yeah, kids getting braces, kids growing up and getting braces. And there's often this correlation. It's very interesting when children start to be subjected to orthodonture and they get braces, a lot of the time it also changes their eyesight because it restructures the shape of their jaw and sometimes their entire skull. Like sometimes all of their face plates literally change and get restructured from orthodonture, and that also changes the ability to see clearly without glasses. So it's like, oh, well, first we're going to artificially shift around your teeth and your mouth in a very unconscious way. And then if it makes your eyesight blurry, we'll just give you this lifelong addiction to corrective lenses. And then everything will be totally fine and great. And again, this is barbaric, but this is considered normal in this time and place. Yeah, so you're not supposed to have to mash things up with your teeth and then swallow it down into your alimentary tract and have it be digested by trillions of gut bacteria. And so this is the interesting thing. So if we're defining self as any cell that actually has your own DNA in it, we have in our bodies many, many cells that are not self. We have many, many cells that some of them are pathogenic, meaning that they do not add up to the overarching health of the organism, and some of them are symbiotic or benevolent. We call them probiotics or your microbiome. There's 3 to 5 trillion gut bacteria that live in our intestines that are necessary, that have to be in there, that we couldn't digest our food without those passengers riding along in our body. Those passengers are not actually supposed to be there because we're not actually supposed to have nutritive paste fermenting in our tummies in order to make our engines go like a steam engine. So that those 5 trillion visitors to your body, they're affecting your mind. And so science on Earth right now recognizes this, like the health of your gut microbiome is connected to emotional health, and that there's serotonin and things like that that are present in the intestines, and that, eating the right foods and being able to digest them effectively is part of being able to have correct mood. And then we can also speak about in parasitic infections such as Candida, which is kind of like a yeast that you can have an overgrowth of the yeast in your body, and Candida can literally affect your behavior because it feeds off of sugars and kind of thrives in kind of like a fermentation anaerobic environment. It makes you want to eat cookies. If you have Candida overgrowth, a lot of the time it creates sugar cravings. So what I'm trying to say with this is that little tiny microorganisms, they might be tiny, but they're tough, and there's a lot of them inside of you, and that they can all gang up and be like, we want you to eat cookies, we want you to eat cookies, and then you actually eat cookies. So it's kind of like, wait, who's actually driving this bus? Is it the bus driver, you, or is it your passengers, the Candida parasites? So all of this in order to say that in the time of Atlantis, before the time of death, before death was invented, before we had to chew up food into a nutritive paste and ferment it in our bellies, the only beings in our bodies, the only cells in our bodies were our cells. Your own cells. What a radical concept. There weren't a bunch of freaking pathogens moving through your bloodstream that you constantly had to defend yourself against. We take this as normal. De rigueur. This is just normal. Like you're a little baby and you come here to Earth and you have a very, unformed immune system. And it's like, oh, baby caught a cold. Oh, baby's throwing up. Oh, baby's got a fever. Like this is considered normal. You have to develop all of these defensive techniques against invading pathogens. And it's the same for plants and animals. Like plants have an immune system. Animals have an immune system. Everybody's got this constant battle that is going on to try to maintain sovereignty, to say, this is me, this is the real me, this is who's supposed to be here, and all of these invaders are not supposed to be here, get the F out of here. And that it's a large amount of biological and energetic energy that is being directed towards these defensive features. And basically that was not necessary in the time before death. So what our lives were like, what our bodies were like, or what the human body was like, was imagine if you are able to generate your own microclimate. Like you can create your own little atmosphere of a perfectly balanced, just like the earth has an atmosphere of, carbon dioxide and oxygen and other noble gases and humidity and temperature. Each person had their own microclimate around them. And all of these proclivities or self-cultivated characteristics, all of these things are necessary as precursors for how experts do star travel. Because experts do not get in a clank metal spaceship, wrapped up in like a fake skin, a space suit, and wearing a space diaper to fly through space. No, experts fly through space naked. You don't need to have a space suit. That's like, and wearing a space diaper, like that's just a total aberration. No, you're supposed to have your own microclimate. And this is also why you're supposed to be able to eat light directly, because you're not supposed to have to be tied to a planet. If you need plants that have to have roots and have to, or be your translation mechanism for light into starch, then you ain't ready to leave your planet. You still need to be rooted to your planet. When you are cultivated to the point where you can eat light directly and produce your own microclimate, then you no longer have to live on a planet. You are now ready to be, let's say, nomadic or free, or to transcend the limits of the former, level of existence. So think about the very many daily chores that we do right now in order to sustain our physical existence that were not necessary, not even imaginable in the time before death. So I mentioned laundry. I don't have to wash out my sweater if I'm not actually sweating, if I'm not actually exuding oils from sebaceous glands. How about hair? You know something? I brush my hair every day. I have relatively long hair. I joke that I shed more on my dog than my dog sheds on me. She's a little short-haired, little chihuahua. We lose hairs every day as part of our normal body process. You brush your hair, and then there's hair left behind on the hairbrush, or there's, hair on the towels, or there's hair on the floor, or hair, stuck on the upholstery. That is normal. That is not what we experienced before death was invented. None of our cells died. So none of your hair cells died. So, it was... if you were a man, it would not be necessary for you to, shave your beard. You could grow an endlessly long, curly beard, and you didn't have to worry about getting food stuck in your beard because you didn't have to eat physical food. And also, I'll tell you about how we used our mouths, because our mouths were not used for, like they are now, for chewing up peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or, whatever, cookies or something like that. Mouths were used for ritualistic sound creation. And because it was a telepathic society, no one had to flap their moving mouth parts to say something like, hey, please pass the ketchup, or something like that. If you needed something from someone, it was a mundane request like that, you could simply telepathically connect with them in order to, have that conversation or make that communication. So actually using the mouth to vibrate the atmosphere was only for very significant things. Just like in this time and place, to sing something at the level of the opera, to sing something in an operatic voice is considered only for special things, or to ritually intone certain, chanting words or something like that is considered, you have to be singing something lyrically significant. You don't usually sing operatically, like, please pass the ketchup. But there are some pretty silly shows that, explore that concept. How ironic and ridiculous it would be if it was like, I got a parking ticket, or something very mundane or silly. I'm doing the laundry. You understand what I'm talking about. In the same way that we look at, the lyrics of an opera as being something that are worthy and special, just to open your mouth and make sounds and vibrate the atmosphere in this ancient time, it required like some significance, some real motivational reason for doing it, not just chatting. No one would just walk along just chatting like, hey, how you doing? How's the weather? just chatting it up. No, that was not happening. So the voice was used very intentionally because our voices are magical. In this time and place, very, very few people recognize that, and the magic is often dissipated in conversations that are just like, please pass the ketchup. However, words have a huge power, and so if humans, even at this, in this level of our development, can recognize like the words that we say really matter and really create our reality. That's what I'm trying to say. Like in the ancient time, if it was significant enough to actually require making a sound with your mouth, that we're talking about reality creation. So, there are some songs that I like the melody, but I won't sing their lyrics because they're lyrics that I don't want to make with my voice, that I don't want to sing something. Like there are some songs if a person's saying that they feel insecure or like they're always sad or something like that. I'm like, I don't want to sing that truth because I don't want to make that my reality. So sometimes I'll change song lyrics so that I can sing along with pop songs. And, I really also specifically look for songs that have, sorry about that noise, that notification. I specifically look for songs that have words that I want to sing. Like there's a song by Jill Scott that's called Blessed, where she sings, "We're so blessed." And I love to sing that song because that is a good thing to vibrate into the atmosphere. Or, a song, anytime, any opportunity to say, "I love you," or like those are worthy words to say. So yes, okay, wait. So, it was not necessary to drink water and urinate. Like, if I think about how much of my day I presently spend obtaining water, drinking it, and urinating, and buying toilet paper in order to accommodate all of this, and paying my water bill, like, wow, like, that's a lot. And, it's like, because of our present genetic degradation, we have a constant need for input of calories, input of water, and then for body comfort, like to expel waste products, expel things that we don't need, and then input more stuff. And I won't say that it's exhausting. I will say that it is a constant effort. And that effort was not necessary in this time before our bodies were changed and degraded to what we presently experience. So yes, it's a challenge to be here in this body, but I don't complain. Like, I know that there are a lot of negatives to this form that are like, oh, it's so choreful. I have to go to the grocery store, and then I have to poop on the toilet, and then I have to clean up my kitchen. It's like, yes, I know that all those things exist, but I look at it more like an opportunity, and I try to make things, fun and interesting and not choreful, and to be appreciative of it. And, some things are really wonderful, like eating raw cookie dough is really wonderful. So, focus on things that are enjoyable like that. And also, like, I grow some wonderful food in my garden, and I think that almost everybody enjoys, like, oh, like that's my homegrown tomato. That can be a really wonderful, fun, satisfying thing to experience. So, okay, in the time before death, we used our teeth and our mouth very differently. We got a dog barking. I think I've mentioned this many times on this radio show. Oh, dog boss is here. Here we go. You guys can't see because she's not on a camera, but she's coming over here right now and kissing me while I do my work. Food storage. In my house right now, in most houses in this time and place, it is considered necessary and very normal to have a big, giant 6-foot tall box where you store your food called the refrigerator. And if you don't have one, it's like you're like a subhuman. You're like living at a substandard, level of living and, in profound poverty. And in the time before we ate physical food, what we had instead were like a giant crystal, many giant crystals. Imagine a giant 6-foot tall rose quartz chunk that is the necessary, furniture or appliance in any dwelling that you choose to be in. And that this is a storage container for food, but not physical food like peanut butter and jelly, but food of consciousness. Because just like a plant, plants get energy when the sun is actually available during the day, but then what's a plant going to do at night? Well, what plants do is they get energy during the day and then they turn their energy into stored sugars and starches and molecular potential energy in their body system that they can utilize during the night. And they actually have to do complex calculations to make sure that they have enough energy to be able to metabolize until the next morning when the sun comes up again. So similar things had to be done in the time when humans ate pure light. If the sun isn't out all the time, what are you going to do during the nighttime? You're going to have to store up some energy for that time. And also, our existence, or the existence of humans then, was much more nomadic. Because if you require sunlight in order to be alive, like right now in this time and place, people think of sunlight as some kind of a luxury. Like, oh, those snowbirds who live in, Michigan or New York, and then when they don't like the weather, they just fly south to Florida for the winter, and they're seen as rather, self-indulgent or something like that. Like, oh, yes, they just want to be where it's sunny all the time. And this is, first of all, I think science is now catching up and recognizing that getting adequate amounts of natural sunlight is actually essential for health and cellular vitality on every level. So it's not just mere indulgence at all. And for my life as Aurora, like I've always needed large levels of sunlight. And when I lived in northern climates during the wintertime, I always found it difficult for me to get enough light to fulfill my nutritional needs, my non-physical nutritional needs. So yeah, I literally re-engineered my life to be able to live in a climate where it's sunny enough, and even in the wintertime where I can do sun gazing and where I can actually ingest the sun, the real sun, through my skin, because it's not so cold that you have to wear like a parka all the time. So yeah, in our present world, the entire tax structure and residential structure is set up for stability, that they want the owners, controllers of humanity, and those who structure society want to maintain humanity with a residence, like knowing where you live. They do not want fluidity or a nomadic existence, because that would be way more difficult in order to be able to control humanity's behavior, and also the tax codes and the way that works, because there's all this stuff right now with property taxes. If you live in a place, then you pay a certain amount of money to that place, and then that place spends that money ostensibly on roads and weed whacking and things like that to make the place nice. And then if they didn't have a certain number of residences to be able to tax, then it's like, who would pay for the schools and who would pay for the roads? There's all these questions about that. So of course, society is not set up right now in order to accommodate or encourage a nomadic existence. However, if you recognize that sunlight is necessary to stay alive, like oxygen, then it means that you need to be able to fluidly move to where there is sunlight, because you're not going to stay in the cold, frozen, whatever. You're not going to live in Chicago in the middle of the winter if you need sunlight in order to stay alive. So it would require the restructuring of society. So in order to become light eaters, this is also like my personal journey. Why did I not just come here and instantaneously be able to be a light eater, which is kind of so much more convenient, and I would have been able to save so much money on 17 years worth of groceries? And the answer is that not only were we able to be more fluid or nomadic in, where we lived, but also, like I said, the giant crystals and, rose quartz and things like that stored up energy. That was just one aspect of how our environment fed us. That this is the ultimate love. Like I say, love is a tone. It's a tone. And when you send out and receive in equal measures, then you're making that tone. I'm getting dog kisses right now. Well, what we're supposed to do is be in love with our environment. We're supposed to be sending out energy to all of the living organisms around us and all the matter and forces and particles around us. And we're also supposed to be receiving energy from all of the matter and forces and particles around us. And I know that each one of you have had the experience of going to a place, sometimes a natural place, but sometimes it can be a cultivated place, like a Zen garden or something like that, a special cultivated garden, and feeling energized just by being in that place. Like there's a Fern Canyon that I went to kind of in Northern California, and some redwood forests that I went to, that when I went there, it wasn't just, that I'm eating sunlight or something like that. I really literally felt nourished by the emanations of the plants and the organisms and the way that the entire space was structured, walking through the paths in the forest. In modern industrialized urban environments, it is almost completely the antithesis of these beautiful redwood forests that I've been in. The feeling of the urban environments and the lack of consciousness in terms of their basic structure is almost astounding. A city does almost everything it possibly can in order to do the opposite of nourish our bodies and nourish our consciousness. So there's a huge issue here in living in an urban environment or living in a human-created environment that was created through unconsciousness, that it becomes then very difficult to be fed by one's environment. So becoming nomadic, having access to sunlight all the time, and then being surrounded by the right aspects of environment. And this is just like, let's say you radiate, like, you're like a light source or a candle or something like that sends out energy. And if you are surrounded by the right type of mirrors or reflectors, the energy then gets reflected back to you. And it could be this, endless process of regeneration. However, if you're not surrounded by the right reflectors, then your energy just gets sent outward and dissipates and doesn't actually go anywhere. So even the sense of, in modern life, very few people live on the family homestead. Very few people live on the property where they were born and, throughout their whole life. And very few people will pass that property down to their children. That is totally new and different. In previous centuries, in previous millennia, what was normal was, you're born in the house where your family has lived for many generations, and you live in that house, and then you grow old, and then you die, they bury you out back, and your little grandchildren live in that house. The land is passed down from generation to generation. And even that creates a cultivated energy field that now in this industrialized world, not only are humans very cut off from nature, but humans are born in an industrialized hospital, move around from house to house, live in apartments, and then, sometimes end up in a senior facility. Like, it's the antithesis. There's very little cultivation of energy field. And that's big because something in other times and places, they might have planted a tree in honor of your birth, and then you would have played underneath that tree as you grew up, and then you would have had the fruit from that tree to feed to your children when you actually had children. Wow, what a different world than the world where we presently live and find ourselves. So in terms of transitioning back to being light eaters, what are we supposed to do? And what's supposed to happen with our intestines? So yeah, they're not supposed to be swollen with probiotic bacteria. Like, that's actually not what they're supposed to be doing, but they are supposed to be like conduits for light, I guess is the best way that I can say it. The best way I can say it is that many of our organs right now are functioning in a capacity that is different than the way they were intentionally, originally created and designed. So this is, we need to be remodified back into our original format in order to be these, perfect pollutionless or emissionless solar energy devices that we are intended to be, as opposed to steam engines. It took external manipulation of our bodies to turn us into what we are right now. And I'll just say, I think that we need some external manipulation in order to transcend what is going on, because it's like we got, if you dug a hole 10 feet deep, then it's like, okay, first you need to now rise up 10 feet just to get to ground level and then begin building from there. So hold on. I'm choosing my words carefully because I don't want this to sound disempowering. I don't want anyone to think like, oh no, like now we need a different set of genetic, modifying doctors to like fix us all, because I'm very much about, we can do these transformations and supersede using only consciousness. I'll say, I believe that just using our own individual consciousnesses, it is powerful enough to be able to transform and reconfigure our biology into the format that it's supposed to be in. I still have my dog kissing me. She just keeps on kissing me. It's wonderful. because I don't want anyone to think like, oh no, now we need a savior race, like a space race that will come along and fix all of our genetic flaws and make it possible for us to eat pure light again. I don't want anyone to fall into that trap. And I don't want anyone to castigate themselves and say like, I'm not good enough, I should be eating pure light at this point, because there's so much that needs to be changed and transformed and reconfigured before we can all go into that state of eating pure light. So we're in a transitionary phase, and it's certainly possible. And, I read stories also about individual practitioners, often from the Far East, who are reportedly not having to eat physical food anymore, that they're able to breathe in, vital life force energy and do sun gazing, and that they are successfully being able to transcend the need for food. So I think that there are also always like people on the vanguard, those beings who are at the head of the curve, the leading edge of the curve, making this transformation. They kind of break new ground and make it possible for others to do so. I won't make any predictions about what is possible or what is not possible or what is needed. I will simply say I know that this can be done and that this is the direction that we are moving. And not to be frustrated with the process either, because I'm telling you guys, like, I came here, I thought I could eat nothing but pure sunlight, and then when I found out like food was necessary, I also thought like, we're all just going to make this transition in maybe like a couple of years. I literally thought it would be over by 2003. And here it is 2018. And I'm like, okay, we're still transitioning. At a certain point, I'm like, when you're staying someplace and you're like, okay, like, you thought you'd be there a few days, but it's turning into a few months. You're going to have to unpack your suitcase. I had to learn, unpack my suitcase. I had to learn all about food. And actually, from becoming an organic gardener of medical cannabis, I had to learn all about the microbiotic realm, because microbes are necessary for plants to be able to be alive and be healthy. And if your plants have nutrient deficiencies, it's often because they don't have the right microorganisms living at the soil level. So that made me learn all about gut bacteria and also bacteria that are on your skin. So there's a whole ecosystem, I wanted to talk about this, of beings that live off of your effluvia of your skin. Like there's mites that live on your eyelashes. There's little tiny yeasts that, eat your sebaceous oils and your excess epithelial cells. There's we're crawling with bacteria. We're crawling with bacteria internally, and not just like in your blood, but I mean, like inside of your intestines and all of the folds of your intestines. And we also have it, we also have all of these organisms that are sometimes pathogenic, but sometimes in a beneficial relationship, that are all over our skin and all over our hair. Though none of those organisms would be living on us if we were in this realm when death did not exist. And so now we can talk about, how does energy actually get in? If we're used to this steam engine type of thing where we have food that goes in and gets combusted, how does it work if this is just like a solar panel? And so energy enters in through the aperture of your inner eye, and then it gets broadcast to each individual cell. And the mitochondria that are inside of each individual cell are actually these amazing antennae. And I'll also get into genes as being antennae too a little bit more, because I've got time on this broadcast. But it's kind of like the difference between having to have an Ethernet wire that connects your computer to, an internet server, or having Bluetooth wireless connectivity. That when we get into these sophisticated higher levels of eating pure sunlight, that energy of pure sunlight is pure consciousness. It doesn't have to flow through a wire to be able to get to the individual cells. It can be broadcast directly to the cells or directly to the mitochondria, the energy creating, utilizing apparatuses in the cells, so that the cells have vitality and they can metabolize and do all the things that they need to do. So it's not like you have to have, like, how you have a blood circulatory system that makes oxygen flow around physically the body. It's not exactly the same. It can be a much more direct, higher dimensional transmission of this energy directly to where it needs to go. Okay, so I was speaking earlier about teeth being like the tuners of the antenna of your neurology, one's neurology. And a big thing is also DNA being an antenna. And that, I came in through this portal that is called the Flying Rainbow Lasagne, and I'm a loving and benevolent consciousness. And there are ancient malevolent consciousnesses that came in through genetic portals or vulnerabilities, or made the portals, made the vulnerabilities, and then came in through them. And there's a huge distinction to be made in who is speaking through the genetic antenna. What is one tuning in on? And, this is very big. Each person should be able to choose what they tune in on with their genetic antenna, and to be able to choose the quality of the organism or entity that is speaking through you, or that you are interacting with, or that is having an experience of life through your apparatus. And that's also big. Like, you have this body. It's like having real estate. It's like saying, if someone wants to be a visitor, it's like, oh yes, you can rent my room for this amount of time under these circumstances. But everyone has to exhibit their own discernment about who you want as house guests. Which thoughts do you want as house guests? Which organisms or entities do you want as genetic house guests? So when I do my class, I never want people to freak out and be like, oh no, there's demons inside of me, or, choose to kill someone else because they think there's demons inside of someone else. But it's the sad truth. There's demons inside of people. Demons are like these supernatural consciousness residues that no longer have bodies. They're semi-alive beings or parasites or viruses of the mind, and they require a host. And so it is up to each person to make choices to say, I don't want to harbor parasites. Just like you say, hey, if you're going to go on a low sugar diet so that you don't want to harbor a bunch of candida parasites in your body, you can say, hey, I'm going to go on a low hatred diet. And that includes self-hatred. I'm going to go on a low judgment diet so that one is not feeding those parasitic thoughts. And this is what, the journey of all of humanity is on right now at this point, of trying to retune the genetic antenna to only be expressing those thoughts that are loving, or to only be connecting with those organisms that are loving. And if it were a completely encrypted, perfect system with no entropy and no loss of signal, then I would define that as heaven. Just many, many minds that are connected through love, that don't lose energy, that loss of energy is entropy. So it's a perpetual motion machine of love and consciousness simply continuing endlessly on its journey. So that was really the intention for this planet, that it was never intended for us to come here and live under great duress and experience a huge amount of suffering, and for it to be necessary to kill other organisms to stay alive, and for us to eventually die. None of that was part of the original plan. None of that at all. So yeah, we were designed also to ascend. And I speak about this almost every week. When I say ascend, I don't necessarily mean, flying saucer take me away, or, I joke, Calgon take me away. It's not an escapism. It's not like a way to get out of something that you don't like. Because I understand a lot of people don't like their experience here. They're like, how do I get out? It's more like metamorphosizing and then having a different experience while still in the same realm. So when people take a hallucinogen, they might still be sitting in the same chair in the same living room, but they're having a very, very different experience of that same living room than they had in, their sobriety. And when we make this metamorphosis and transformation of consciousness, we might be in the same context. Like, you might be on the same planet or sitting in the same room, or, underneath the same blue sky. However, one begins to have a very different transformed perception of that same landscape. So it's like the sun is giving us all this energy right now, but because many people don't have the right thought structure, they cannot eat the energy directly. Everyone's been programmed to think, if you want to eat food, you got to get a tree to be an intermediary and make an apple, then you can eat that apple. No one is thinking, or very few people here up until this point have been thinking, I want to eat food. I'll just tap directly into the sun and I'll make my own mental apple. I'll make my own mental experience of food. And this is what, is necessary to do. So it's a change in thought structure. It's a change in perception. It's a change in consciousness structure. And this is also what going through stargates really is like. In order to go through these portals and have a different experience of a different level of reality, it's not like you have a physical key that turns in a physical lock. It is much more like having a transformed story. Like I told you about the cosmology, the origin story. How did things get here? Why are they here? What makes them tick? What makes them move forward? And, we can laugh at primitive origin stories. But I'll tell you that a lot of cultures are laughing at Earth Science's origin story. They're like, Big Bang, blah, ha, ha. Like, that's so ridiculous. I can't believe they believe that. Like, they're snickering away. Transforming that origin story or the cosmology is part of understanding in a new way and having an expansive, it's the healing, it's the rectification, is understanding for real where we came from, how we got to be in this place, and where we are going, and what is the best way to get there. So yes, so I'm totally not about clank clank metal spaceships. I literally am the embodiment. I'm embodying this truth and showing it to everyone that a much more effective way to do star travel is through pure consciousness. And it is done with love as the fuel that makes things go, you know, the gas in the car that makes your car go. And love is a tone of equal giving and taking, so that it's also non-exploitive. And that this is also about the value system of freedom. Being able to go as a consciousness where you want to go. So this is a question. If you're a photon and you're flying around, you want to fly around where you want to fly around. But if you get caught on a leaf, then you turn into a plant, and then you're busy living life as a plant, and then you get eaten by an animal, then you're busy living in the tummy of an animal. And it's like, where does that consciousness actually want to be going? Does it actually want to be going through this circuitous route, or does it want to be going someplace much more directly? And my answer is that we are supposed to be in a rapport with the sun and with the stellar network, that the sun and the stellar network is sending out light. Light is consciousness, light is awareness, light is timelines and opportunities and possibilities and probabilities, and we're supposed to eat those probabilities. We're supposed to literally eat time and then send back or broadcast back our experience of being in time to the emanator that created the time. It's like the chef made the food, the chef sent us the food, we're supposed to eat the food and broadcast back what it's like to taste the food on our tongue. And then the chef can say, oh, I did a really good job of cooking that steak. I did a really good job of making that salad. And oh, this wine is so divine. And then, or maybe, oh, that steak came out a little bit overdone. I should change it next time. Or maybe, oh, the salad's gritty. Didn't wash it properly. We need to change it. And that really has everything to do with our life experiences. And right now we're under this, have been up until this point on this planet after the degradation, under great duress, experiencing a lot of suffering. And the chef doesn't actually know. The chef keeps on making food, making consciousness food, sending it out to us, the eaters, the diners in the dining area. And some of it is burnt, and some of it arrives cold, and some of it is congealed and disgusted, and some of it might even have grown maggots at a certain point. And the chef doesn't know. And once we begin to be able to send back feedback to the chef and say, hey, this is what we're actually eating, this is what the experience is actually like, the food can improve exponentially. So it's all of this idea that we've had delayed and impeded communication with the sun and the stellar network. It's all supposed to be in real time, like a live stream broadcast, not everything after the fact. So we're supposed to be able to broadcast back and say, hey, this is what we're experiencing right now. These are the problems. These are the things we need help with. And these are the things, like this is where we'd like to go and what we'd like to do. And it's supposed to be this wonderful partnership. And then the chef sends us better food. And then we're able to send back the feedback of what it was like to eat the food. So that's what it's supposed to be like. And for anybody who loves pizza and cookies and all sorts of good stuff like that, you don't lose all of that stuff when you become a light eater. In fact, you still get to have all that stuff, and imagine what it would be like to eat cookies from another planet, or cookies that an octopus would want to eat. You get to have mental experiences of food that are almost unimaginable. So thank you for tuning into my broadcast and ingesting these ideas with me, and please continue to dance like a flying rainbow lasagna in this new dimension.